Welcome to Through the Bible in a Year with Pastor John. We invite you to join us at 1 Oakleigh Avenue in North Providence, Rhode Island. This podcast is presented to you by The Way Ministries, supported by listeners like you. For donations, live videos, podcasts, and more, please visit www.thewayministriesri.org. Thank you and have a great day.
Hi everybody, welcome to Through the Bible in a Year with Pastor John. Glad you could join me today to get a portion of God's Word. Today we're going to begin the book of Leviticus. Before we get started, I just want to say congratulations for reading through the book of Exodus with me. You're doing a great job. Just hang in there. Keep walking with the Lord every day. You'll get blessed by His Word and He will speak to you. Leviticus, Introduction. Delivered by God to Moses on Mount Sinai, the instructions of Leviticus pertain to Israel's personal and national life. Leviticus, the new nation's book of worship, derives its name from the tribe of Levi, to whom God entrusted the ceremonies of worship and the physical care of the tabernacle. Leviticus records God's solutions to the twin dilemmas of how a sinful people can achieve access to Him through animal sacrifices and maintain fellowship with Him through obedience to His Word. Focus, divisions, topics, place, and time. Sacrifice, voluntary offerings, chapters 1 to 3. Compulsory offerings, chapters 4 to 7. Priestly orders, chapters 8 to 10. Access to God by sacrifice, priests, Mount Sinai, and about 1 month. Sanctification, personal purity, chapters 11 through 15. National purity, chapters 16 to 20. Priestly purity, chapters 21 to 23. And future purity, chapters 24 to 27. Topic, fellowship with God by obedience, and feasts, place, Mount Sinai, and time, about 1 month. Vital statistics. Author, Moses, according to Jewish tradition. Date written, uncertain, perhaps 1445 to 1444 BC. Purpose, to outline the Levites' duties in worship and to teach the Israelites how to live holy lives. Themes, sacrifice and offering, proper worship, healthy living, and the importance of holiness. Day 32, February 1st, Leviticus chapters 1 to 3. 3 voluntary offerings. Overview. Leviticus opens with a description of the 5 different sacrifices an Israelite could offer. 3 for those in fellowship with God, worship offerings, and 2 for those out of fellowship with God, compulsory offerings. The 3 worship offerings were tailored to the person's ability to give, and each kind had a special significance. The burnt offering signified the devotion of the worshiper to God. The grain offering pointed to God's provision in life, and the peace offering pictured the thankful worshiper's fellowship with God. Chapter 1, burnt offering. Chapter 2, grain offering. Chapter 3, peace offering and worship offerings. Insight. Exodus and Leviticus, a study in contrasts. Leviticus 1 to 27. Exodus emphasizes pardon. Leviticus emphasizes purity. Exodus emphasizes God's approach to people. Leviticus emphasizes people's approach to God. Exodus emphasizes salvation. Leviticus emphasizes sanctification. Exodus emphasizes let my people go. Leviticus emphasizes be holy because I, the Lord your God, am holy. Insight. No yeast in the least. Leviticus 2:11. In the Passover celebration, the ban on yeast reflected the need for haste in escaping Egypt. Exodus 12:39. It was prohibited in the grain offerings because it also symbolizes sin. Leviticus 2:11. A tiny bit of yeast affects an entire loaf of bread. In the same way, a little sin can spread and ruin a person, as Jesus indicated when he warned his disciples to avoid the yeast of the Pharisees and Sadducees. Matthew 16:6. Leviticus chapter 1. Procedures for the burnt offering. The Lord called to Moses from the tabernacle and said to him, "Give the following instructions to the people of Israel. When you present an animal as an offering to the Lord, you may take it from your herd of cattle or your flock of sheep and goats. If the animal you present as a burnt offering is from the herd, it must be a male with no defects. Bring it to the entrance of the tabernacle so you may be accepted by the Lord. Lay your hand on the animal's head, and the Lord will accept its death in your place to purify you, making you right with him. Then slaughter the young bull in the Lord's presence, and Aaron's sons, the priests, will present the animal's blood by splattering it against all sides of the altar that stands at the entrance to the tabernacle. Then skin the animal and cut it into pieces. The sons of Aaron the priest will build a wood fire on the altar. They will arrange the pieces of the offering, including the head and fat, on the wood burning on the altar. But the internal organs and the legs must first be washed with water. Then the priest will burn the entire sacrifice on the altar as a burnt offering. It is a special gift, a pleasing aroma to the Lord. If the animal you present as a burnt offering is from the flock, it may be either a sheep or a goat, but it must be a male with no defects. Slaughter the animal on the north side of the altar in the Lord's presence, and Aaron's sons, the priest, will splatter its blood against all sides of the altar. Then cut the animal in pieces, and the priest will arrange the pieces of the offering, including the head and fat, on the wood burning on the altar. But the internal organs and the legs must first be washed with water. Then the priest will burn the entire sacrifice on the altar as a burnt offering. It is a special gift, a pleasing aroma to the Lord. If you present a bird as a burnt offering to the Lord, choose either a turtle dove or a young pigeon. The priest will take the bird to the altar, wring off its head, and burn it on the altar. But first he must drain its blood against the side of the altar. The priest must also remove the crop and the feathers and throw them in the ashes on the east side of the altar. Then, grasping the bird by its wings, the priest will tear the bird open, but without tearing it apart. Then he will burn it as a burnt offering on the wood burning on the altar. It is a special gift, a pleasing aroma to the Lord. Leviticus chapter 2. Procedures for the grain offering. When you present grain as an offering to the Lord, the offering must consist of choice flour. You are to pour olive oil on it, sprinkle it with frankincense, and bring it to Aaron's sons, the priests. The priest will scoop out a handful of the flour, moistened with oil, together with all the frankincense, and burn this representative portion on the altar. It is a special gift, a pleasing aroma to the Lord. The rest of the grain offering will then be given to Aaron and his sons. This offering will be considered a most holy part of the special gifts presented to the Lord. If your offering is a grain offering baked in an oven, it must be made of choice flour, but without any yeast. It may be presented in the form of thin cakes mixed with olive oil or wafers spread with olive oil. If your grain offering is cooked on a griddle, it must be made of choice flour mixed with olive oil, but without any yeast. Break it in pieces and pour olive oil on it. It is a grain offering. If your grain offering is prepared in a pan, it must be made of choice flour and olive oil. No matter how a grain offering for the Lord has been prepared, bring it to the priest, who will present it at the altar. The priest will take a representative portion of the grain offering and burn it on the altar. It is a special gift, a pleasing aroma to the Lord. The rest of the grain offering will then be given to Aaron and his sons as their food. This offering will be considered a most holy part of the special gifts presented to the Lord. Do not use yeast in preparing any of the grain offerings you present to the Lord, because no yeast or honey may be burned as a special gift presented to the Lord. You may add yeast and honey to an offering of the first crops of your harvest, but these must never be offered on the altar as a pleasing aroma to the Lord. Season all your grain offerings with salt to remind you of God's eternal covenant. Never forget to add salt to your grain offerings. If you present a grain offering to the Lord from the first portion of your harvest, bring fresh grain that is coarsely ground and roasted on a fire. Put olive oil on this grain offering and sprinkle it with frankincense. The priest will take a representative portion of the grain moistened with oil, together with all the frankincense, and burn it as a special gift presented to the Lord. Leviticus chapter 3. Procedures for the peace offering. If you present an animal from the herd as a peace offering to the Lord, it may be a male or a female, but it must have no defects. Lay your hand on the animal's head and slaughter it at the entrance of the tabernacle. Then Aaron's sons, the priests, will splatter its blood against all sides of the altar. The priest must present part of this peace offering as a special gift to the Lord. This includes all the fat around the internal organs, the 2 kidneys, and the fat around them near the loins, and the long lobe of the liver. These must be removed with the kidneys, and Aaron's sons will burn them on top of the burnt offering on the wood burning on the altar. This is a special gift, a pleasing aroma to the Lord. If you present an animal from the flock as a peace offering to the Lord, it may be a male or female, but it must have no defects. If you present a sheep as your offering, bring it to the Lord, lay your hand on its head, and slaughter it in front of the tabernacle. Aaron's sons will then splatter the sheep's blood against all sides of the altar. The priest must present the fat of this peace offering as a special gift to the Lord. This includes the fat of the broad tail cut off near the backbone, all the fat around the internal organs, the 2 kidneys, and the fat around them near the loins, and the long lobe of the liver. These must be removed with the kidneys, and the priest will burn them on the altar. It is a special gift of food presented to the Lord. If you present a goat as your offering, bring it to the Lord. Lay your hand on its head and slaughter it in front of the tabernacle. Aaron's sons will then splatter the goat's blood against all sides of the altar. The priest must present part of this offering as a special gift to the Lord. This includes all the fat around the internal organs, the 2 kidneys, and the fat around them near the loins, and the long lobe of the liver. These must be removed with the kidneys, and the priest will burn them on the altar. It is a special gift of food, a pleasing aroma to the Lord. All the fat belongs to the Lord. You must never eat any fat or blood. This is a permanent law for you, and it must be observed from generation to generation wherever you live. My daily walk. During a visit to Korea, 2 American businessmen were amused to see a young farmer hitched to a plow that was guided by his father. Later, they learned that both father and son were Christians who sold their only ox to provide money for a new church building. "What a stupendous sacrifice!" exclaimed one of the businessmen. "Not really," replied a missionary accompanying them. "They were only sorry that they had but one ox to give to the Lord's work." On one occasion, Jesus was dining with a Pharisee named Simon when an immoral woman interrupted the dinner by anointing Jesus' feet with expensive perfume. The Lord responded, "I tell you, her sins, and they are many, have been forgiven, so she has shown me much love." Luke 7, verse 47. What is one tangible way in which you can show your gratitude today for God's great love and forgiveness? Select a 21st century sacrifice of praise you can offer Him, perhaps in the form of a special offering or act of kindness. A drop of praise is unsuitable acknowledgement for an ocean of mercy. That's all for today, my friends. It was great reading with you today. Have a great day. God bless. I will see you tomorrow. Peace.